Imagine reaching into your pocket for a simple 25-cent coin and realizing you're holding a hidden fortune. Most people see a Washington quarter as nothing more than spare change, but a few rare ones are worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars, and they're still out there mixed in circulation, waiting for the right person to notice them. These quarters were born from minting accidents, low mintages, and mysterious errors that collectors spend years hunting for. Today, we're uncovering the top 3 rarest U.S. Washington quarters, coins so valuable, so iconic, and so unbelievably hard to find that they've become legends in the coin world. If you've ever wondered whether the quarter in your hand could change your life, this is your moment. Stay with me, because the rarest one might be sitting in your house right now. It can turn a simple 25 cents into thousands of dollars instantly. These aren't just ordinary coins. These are hidden treasures minted by mistake, lost in circulation, and quietly waiting to be discovered. And today, we're diving into the top 3 rarest U.S. Washington quarters that could change your entire coin-collecting journey. So get ready. The Washington quarter dollar 1972 holds a significant place in the long history of American coinage. It continues the legacy that began in 1932, when the Washington quarter was first introduced to honor the 200th birthday of George Washington, designed by sculptor John Flanagan. The obverse features the left-facing portrait of George Washington with the inscriptions, "Liberty in God We Trust," and the year of mintage, while the reverse carries the image of a majestic, bald eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows and olive branches symbolizing strength and peace. The 1972 Washington quarter was struck at 3 different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia mint coins have no mint mark. The Denver mint coins carry a D mint mark, and the San Francisco mint coins with the S mark were produced as proof coins primarily for collectors. In 1972, all regular circulation quarters were made of a copper-nickel clad composition, which had replaced the 90% silver alloy starting in 1965. This change occurred due to the rising cost of silver and the need for a more economical metal composition. The copper-nickel quarters feature a pure copper core sandwiched between 2 layers of nickel, which gives the coin its distinct silvery appearance. The total mintage for the 1972 Washington quarter was high, with hundreds of millions of pieces struck, making it a common date for collectors. However, there are still details that attract numismatists, including variations in strike quality, mint mark position and condition. Coins with strong luster, full details on Washington's hair, and the eagle's feathers are considered more desirable among collectors. The proof versions made in San Francisco are especially notable for their mirror-like surfaces and sharp design details. In terms of design, the 1972 quarter remained consistent with Flanagan's original artwork, although over the decades minor modifications were made to improve clarity and die life. The coin has a diameter of 243 millimeters, weighs 568 grams, and has a reeded edge. Like other coins of its era, it was widely circulated and used for everyday transactions in the 1970s, representing an important part of daily commerce in the United States. The historical significance of the Washington Quarter series lies not only in its design, but also in its representation of American ideals. The eagle on the reverse embodies the nation's strength, while the portrait of Washington reminds citizens of leadership and integrity. By 1972, the quarter had already become a familiar symbol of American coinage and would continue to evolve in the following decades, with design changes starting in 1999 when the 50-state quarters program was launched. Collectors today often seek 1972 quarters in mint state condition or proof quality, especially those with high grades from professional coin grading services. While most circulated, examples hold only face value. Pristine examples can be worth more depending on condition and rarity. Some error coins from 1972, such as off-center strikes or double-die obverses, are also sought after for their uniqueness. The Washington Quarter of 1972 stands as a reflection of American history, economics, and artistry. It links the traditional values of the early 20th century with the modern age of coinage and continues to be appreciated by historians, collectors, and coin enthusiasts worldwide. By 1972, the Washington quarter dollar had already established itself as one of the most recognizable coins in the United States. The coin had been in circulation for 4 decades since its first issue in 1932, which was originally intended as a one-year commemorative coin honoring the 200th birthday of George Washington. However, the design became so popular that it replaced the standing Liberty quarter permanently. The Washington quarter was designed by John Flanagan, a sculptor. From New York, whose design was chosen from many submissions, his portrait of Washington was based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous 1786 bust of the first president, which is considered one of the most accurate likenesses ever made. The reverse of the coin featuring the eagle was also created by Flanagan and symbolized national pride and military preparedness. The 1972 Washington quarter was struck during an era when the United States Mint had fully transitioned away from silver coinage. The Coinage Act of 1965 had ended the use of silver in circulating dimes and quarters due to rising silver prices that made the metal more valuable than its face value. This led to the introduction of the copper-nickel-clad composition, which featured a pure copper core with outer layers of copper-nickel alloy. This change not only reduced production costs, but also ensured the stability of the coin supply during a time of economic adjustment. The 1972 quarter's production was extensive. Because the coin was heavily used in daily transactions, such as vending machines, parking meters, and public telephones. The Philadelphia Mint struck more than 200 million coins, while the Denver Mint produced over 300 million, making it one of the most common issues of the decade. Despite the large mintages, collectors still value coins that have survived in high grades with sharp details and minimal wear. The San Francisco Mint issued proof coins specifically for collectors as part of the annual proof sets. These coins were struck multiple times using specially polished dies, resulting in sharp designs and mirror-like fields. Proof sets from 1972 are still popular among numismatists for their craftsmanship and historical context. In the broader historical setting, the 1972 Washington quarter circulated during a time of cultural and economic change in America. The early 1970s saw the end of the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and growing inflation. Coinage, during this period, reflected both technological advances in minting and the country's shift toward more modern economic policies. The Washington quarter thus served as both a tool of commerce and a small piece of national identity. In terms of varieties, there are some minor distinctions among the 1972 quarters. Some collectors have noted slight differences in die strength and the sharpness of Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. Though not classified as major varieties, these subtle traits make certain coins more appealing to specialists. Error coins, such as double strikes, clipped planchets, or weakly struck coins from worn dies, also attract collector interest. Over the years, the Washington quarter design remained largely unchanged until 1999, when the 50-state quarters program was introduced. This program revived public interest in the series and brought new attention to earlier coins like the 1972 issue. Collectors began revisiting these classic quarters, appreciating their history, craftsmanship, and the stories they carried through decades of circulation. The Washington quarter of 1972 stands as a representative of an important transitional period in American coinage. It bridged the era of silver coins with the modern clad coinage system. It also continued to embody the enduring respect for George Washington, whose image has graced the quarter for nearly a century. Today, the 1972 quarter serves as both a nostalgic relic of the past and a reminder of the evolving history of the United States Mint, from the artistry of the early 20th century to the technological precision of modern coinage. The story of the Washington quarter dollar 1973 begins many decades before the coin was actually minted because its design history is deeply rooted in the early 20th century when the United States sought to honor the nation's first president, George Washington, with a circulating coin. The Washington quarter was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth, and although the original plan was to use the design for just 1 year, the coin became so popular that it replaced the standing Liberty quarter permanently. By the time 1973 arrived, the Washington quarter had already established itself as one of the most recognizable circulating coins in American history, and it continued to reflect the evolution of American coinage politics, economics, and minting technology. The year 1973 is especially interesting because it sits in a period of major transformation for the United States Mint. Only 8 years earlier, in 1965, America had ended the production of silver quarters and replaced them with clad copper-nickel compositions in response to rising silver prices and widespread coin hoarding. By 1973, the clad quarter was still considered relatively new, and many collectors were paying close attention to the quality of the strikes. The performance of the new planchets and the overall appearance of the coins produced at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. The clad composition featured an outer layer of copper-nickel bonded to a pure copper core, and although it lacked the luster and weight of the earlier silver issues, it demonstrated better durability for modern circulation needs. On the obverse side, the 1973 Washington quarter continued using the famous portrait of George Washington, designed by sculptor John Flanagan, whose design was selected from a group of submissions in 1931. The portrait shows Washington facing left with the word "Liberty" above his head and the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left. The date appears at the bottom, and for 1973, the font and position remained consistent with the post-1965 design standard. Flanagan's portrait had experienced many subtle modifications over the decades, and by 1973, additional refinements had been made to accommodate modern minting technology and improve strike clarity, especially in the hair details and the lower neckline. The reverse design of the 1973 quarter features a heraldic eagle with wings spread clutching a bundle of arrows and an olive branch symbolizing both the strength and desire for peace that define the American spirit. The design includes the words United States of America and E pluribus unum above the eagle and the denomination quarter dollar below. Although this reverse design remained consistent for many years, experts often observe that the details and sharpness of the eagle vary notably from one mint to another and from 1 year to another depending on die wear and production pressure. The 1973 issues reflect the typical characteristics of early 1970s clad quarters, which often show slightly weaker strikes, particularly in the eagle's feathers. 3 minting facilities were involved in the production of Washington quarters during the early 1970s, but for 1973, only 2 mints produced regular circulation strikes. The Philadelphia Mint struck coins without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint produced coins with the D mint mark, placed to the right of the ribbon under the eagle on the reverse. The San Francisco Mint also made 1973 quarters, but exclusively as proof coins intended for collectors and not for general circulation. These proof coins bear the S mint mark and are struck with polished dies on specially prepared planchets, delivering a stunning mirror-like finish that contrasts sharply with frosted design features. The Philadelphia minted 1973 quarter is widely available today because millions were produced. But collectors often note that finding examples with sharp strikes in uncirculated condition can be a challenge due to the heavy use of dies and high-speed production. The Denver Mint produced an even larger number of 1973 D quarters, and these coins are generally more sharply struck than their Philadelphia counterparts, but they also suffer from common contact marks because of their high mintage and massive distribution. High-grade Denver examples are easier to locate, but Securing a flawless specimen requires patience and careful inspection. The 1973 S-Proof quarter is highly regarded among collectors for its clarity, sharpness, and overall visual appeal. These proofs were sold in sets to collectors and were never intended for everyday use. The cameo and deep cameo varieties are particularly prized because the contrast between frosted devices and mirrored fields is especially strong for this year, making them attractive display pieces. The process of creating these proofs required multiple strikes and meticulous die preparation, resulting in sharply defined details that stand out far more clearly than those on circulation strikes. Economically, the early 1970s were a complicated time for the United States, with inflation, rising energy issues growing, and the aftermath of the 1965 Coinage Act still influencing decisions at the Mint. Because the Mint was focused on creating reliable high-volume coinage for a growing population, the priority during 1973 was producing durable, practical quarters rather than experimenting with new compositions or designs. The clad quarter remained the most cost-effective solution, and by 1973, the public had fully accepted the new weight and appearance of clad coinage. Collectors today value the 1973 Washington quarter mostly for its historical context, rather than rarity, because the year does not contain major errors or intentional variations. However, minor die varieties can be found, including double die obverse or reverse examples, weakly struck eagles die cracks, and off-center strikes, though these are usually scarce and command attention mainly among specialist collectors. The overall value of a 1973 quarter in circulated condition remains low because so many were produced, but uncirculated and proof examples, especially those with exceptional luster or cameo contrast, often achieve strong premiums. The Washington quarter of 1973 represents a bridge between the early classic era of American silver coinage and the fully modern age of clad circulation coinage. It serves as a reminder of the changes that took place within the Mint and the broader economy and reflects the nation's continued respect for George Washington, whose image has appeared on the quarter for more than 90 years. Whether examined by a historian, a numismatist, or a casual collector, the 1973 quarter stands as a fascinating piece of American monetary history and continues to circulate today as a symbol of national identity, tradition, and the evolution of American currency. The Washington quarter dollar of 1973 gains even more depth when viewed within the broader historical timeline of American coin production during a period when the United States Mint was undergoing steady modernization. The early 1970s marked a transitional era for American coinage policy because the Mint was moving away from traditional craftsmanship and embracing high-speed, fully mechanized systems that could produce hundreds of millions of coins each month. This shift deeply affected the character of coins like the 1973 quarter because the tools, dies, and planchets used in its production were part of these updated systems which prioritized quantity and uniformity over artistic sharpness. As a result, many 1973 quarters show the typical circulation strike softness that is characteristic of the early clad era, where the metal composition and minting techniques were still being refined to create the best possible results for the public. To further understand the 1973 quarter, one must consider how the nation's economy influenced its mintage levels and distribution patterns. The United States in the early 1970s faced inflationary pressures and shifts in consumer behavior, which drove increased demand for circulating coinage. Businesses, banks, and retail industries required stable coin supplies to keep cash flow systems running smoothly. In response, the Mint allocated considerable resources to quarter production because the 25-cent denomination was one of the most heavily used coins in commerce, especially for vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, and public transport systems. This high demand explains why the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced hundreds of millions of 1973 quarters, despite the absence of any commemorative purpose or special events tied to the year. Another important aspect of the 1973 Washington quarter's story involves the gradual decline of silver coin hoarding, which had soared in the 1960s. Even though circulating quarters had not contained silver since 1965, many Americans continued storing older silver quarters long after the transition because of the belief that precious metal-based currency was inherently more valuable and stable. The history of the Washington quarter dollar of 1977 is deeply connected to the long legacy of the quarter series that began in 1932 and continued through one of the most important shifts in American coinage during the mid-20th century. To understand the 1977 quarter, it is important to look back to the origins of the Washington quarter, which was first conceived as a one-year commemorative issue honoring the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth in 1932, but its design by sculptor John Flanagan became so widely accepted that it transitioned into a permanent circulating coin. The original idea behind the Washington quarter was to replace the standing Liberty quarter, which had been minted since 1916. And although many collectors appreciated the elegance of the earlier design, the Washington quarter offered a more modern and recognizable portrait of the nation's first president. The early Washington quarters were minted in 90% silver, but this approach faced difficulties as silver prices fluctuated and costs of production rose. In 1965, the United States Mint shifted to a copper-nickel-clad composition due to a nationwide coin shortage and rising silver demand, marking a new era for circulating quarters. This change created the modern-clad quarter, which remained largely unchanged through the 1970s, including the 1977 issue. By the time 1977 arrived, the Washington quarter had already been in circulation for 45 years, and the Mint was focused on producing reliable and consistent clad coins for an expanding American economy. The United States of the 1970s was a country experiencing inflation, energy crises, and economic restructuring, all of which increased the need for stable coinage. Minting processes continued to improve due to advances in machinery and quality control, and the Philadelphia and Denver mints became the primary producers of business strike 1977 quarters, while the San Francisco Mint focused on proof coins for collectors. The mintage of 1977 quarters was substantial because the coin was a daily necessity in vending machines, parking meters, transit systems, and commercial settings, and its widespread use meant that the Mint had to ensure high production quantities each year. The obverse of the 1977 quarter continued to feature John Flanagan's iconic portrait of George Washington, a design that millions of Americans were familiar with and that had become a symbol of stability in the nation's pocket change. Washington's portrait had originally been criticized by a few early reviewers who felt that it did not match the artistic expectations for a presidential commemoration, but it grew into one of the most recognizable designs in U.S. coinage history. The reverse still displayed the heraldic American eagle perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below a classic symbol of American strength and peace. This reverse design remained untouched until the State Quarters program launched in 1999, making the 1977 quarter part of the final era before major redesigns began sweeping across U.S. coinage. The year 1977 also reflected a period when coin collecting was rising in popularity as more people became interested in modern issues, errors, varieties, and proof sets. This increased attention meant that collectors began examining circulating quarters more closely for strike-quality mint marks and unusual variations. For the 1977 quarter, the most common varieties include differences in strike strength between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, along with minor die chips or weak strikes caused by worn dies, especially toward the end of production runs. Because the clad composition used since 1965 sometimes produced coins with inconsistent luster or weak details. Certain 1977 quarters show slightly duller surfaces or variations in rim thickness, but these were normal outcomes of mass production rather. than intentional changes. The United States Mint in 1977 also continued refining its overall coinage processes. Proof quarters from San Francisco struck that year were made with specialized dies and polished planchets producing mirror-like fields and frosted devices. These proof coins were packaged into annual sets purchased by collectors across the country, and they captured the polished elegance of the Washington Quarter design during that time. Meanwhile, business strike coins were made for everyday use and circulated heavily due to the robust economic activity of the late 1970s. As quarters changed hands daily, they quickly showed signs of wear, and much of the 1977 mintage spent decades in circulation, with many pieces still found in pocket change today. The 1977 Washington Quarter also holds historical significance because it represents the stability of pre-state quarter coinage, as well as the enduring legacy of George Washington's image on American money. It is part of a long stretch of coins that remained visually consistent for nearly 70 years, making it an important chapter in the history of American numismatics. Even though the 1977 quarter is common and not considered a rare date, it remains valuable to collectors for its place within the broader story of modern U.S. coinage, especially for those who collect date runs, mint mark varieties, or proof sets. Looking deeper into the cultural and economic context of the late 1970s further enriches the story of the 1977 quarter. This was a time when American society was undergoing transition, with new technology slowly entering daily life and coin-operated machines becoming increasingly important. Quarters were essential for arcade games, laundromats, payphones, and public transportation, making the Washington Quarter one of the most frequently handled coins in the nation. Because of this high demand, the Mint produced hundreds of millions of quarters each year, including the 1977 issue, ensuring that Americans always had access to reliable circulating currency. In terms of design artistry and tradition, the 1977 Washington Quarter serves as a tribute to the craftsmanship of John Flanagan, whose design endured despite changes in metal composition, production technology, and public expectations. His portrait of Washington remained unchanged for decades, becoming a familiar symbol of trust and continuity. And even though later coinage programs introduced dramatic redesigns, the classic Washington Quarter left a lasting cultural imprint. Collectors of modern coinage often view the 1977 quarter as part of the final decades of the traditional style before the dramatic shift in 1999, when each state began receiving its own unique reverse. Today, the 1977 quarter continues to hold interest for collectors, beginner numismatists, and history enthusiasts. Whether found in circulation rolls or personal collections, these coins serve as small historical artifacts representing a specific moment in American minting history. They reflect the economic conditions, the minting technologies, and the cultural atmosphere of their time, and they stand as a link between the early 20th century origins of the Washington Quarter and the modern artistic expansions that would follow in later decades. The coin tells the continuing story of American identity, resilience, and tradition expressed through everyday currency that millions of people used without ever realizing its deeper history.